My family has always been secretive about our lineage. Growing up, I'd hear whispers at reunions, odd remarks about curses and the black sheep in every generation. But whenever I tried to pry, my father would hush me with a stern glance, and my mother would redirect the conversation. I never got a straight answer, just the uneasy impression that some dark stain lay on our family's past. It wasn't until this year, under a harvest moon in mid-autumn, that the pieces finally fell into my hands. We all came together in a rural village tucked away in the Welsh countryside for Great-Aunt Caroline's funeral. She'd been the last of my grandmother's siblings, a frail old woman with a penchant for bizarre bedtime stories about wolves and the devil's hounds. Most of our relatives lived scattered across the region, so funerals typically became reluctant family reunions. The ancient stone church perched on a hill overlooking rows of crooked headstones. A cold wind swept through the graves, carrying the scent of damp earth and wilting flowers. I arrived with my wife Miriam and our teenage son Theo. We drove up a day early to settle in the small cottage we'd rented near the village. The funeral would be the next morning, but the extended family wanted an informal gathering that evening. As we pulled up the gravel road, I noticed Theo's face bathed in moonlight, pale, pinched, withdrawn. He'd been unusually quiet since we left home. "Are you feeling all right?" I asked as I parked. Theo nodded stiffly. "Yeah, just tired, headache." I chalked it up to teenage mood swings or maybe the stress of traveling for a funeral. Miriam squeezed my hand in silent sympathy before we lugged our suitcases inside. That night, after the informal wake concluded, I retreated upstairs to unpack. Miriam had gone to the kitchen to fix a late snack, and Theo drifted outside to the garden, claiming he needed fresh air. As I sorted through my clothes, I pulled out a worn old coat that had once belonged to my father, an heirloom I'd inherited last year when he passed away. I intended to fold it and place it aside when something crinkled in the lining. Curious, I felt around and discovered a hidden interior pocket. My heart skipped. Carefully, I tugged open a small tear in the fabric and found a slim, leather-bound notebook, my father's handwriting etched in black ink across the opening page. I settled on the bed, flipping through the pages. At first, it seemed like random scribbles and dates. But then I recognized names, my grandfather's, my grandmother's siblings, even references to Great-Aunt Caroline. One sentence repeated with subtle variation. The black sheep emerges each generation cursed blood. A chill ran through me. I turned more pages, reading passages about how my father's grandfather had warned him of a cyclical taint that manifested in certain births. The affected child became the black sheep, someone who changed around the harvest moon, someone who threatened the family's safety. My father's scrawl grew more frantic the further I read. I don't know how much of this is legend or madness, but grandfather insisted it was real. He taught me the signs to watch for: feverish restlessness, sensitivity to moonlight, a hunger that can't be satisfied. He believed we carried a curse from centuries ago, back when our ancestors made deals with spirits in the forest. Perhaps it's nonsense, or perhaps not. Goosebumps prickled my arms. My father hadn't seemed like a superstitious man. He was a pragmatic, stoic figure, yet here he was, writing about curses and transformations. Another passage made my hands tremble. It skipped me, but it won't skip my son. I fear for him, fear what he may become under the full moon. If the curse latches onto his blood, I must be ready. The date on that entry was mere months before my father died. I swallowed hard, feeling my stomach knot. He wrote, "It won't skip my son." That means me. Suddenly the cottage felt too small, the walls pressing in. I stashed the journal, unsure what to think. My father must have been in the grip of some delusion, unless the stories had an eerie kernel of truth. Either way, the notion of a black sheep in each generation who turned into something sounded like the ramblings of a man haunted by old folklore. But then I recalled how my father had always been strangely protective, especially on nights of the full moon. He never let me wander outside after dark, always had an excuse to keep me inside. Could it be related to these fears? I shook my head. Ridiculous. I barely slept. Vivid nightmares of howling in the dark jolted me awake. In the morning, we dressed for the funeral under grey skies. The service was somber, the church's musty incense mingling with the aroma of damp coats. Everyone wore black, murmuring condolences. My mind was elsewhere, replaying the journal's words. Afterward, the family gathered at a nearby hall for tea and sandwiches. Theo seemed restless, glancing out the windows at the midday sky. I asked if he was ill, but he just shrugged. Late that afternoon, we returned to our cottage to rest before dinner. The full moon was due that night, one of those bright harvest moons that hung low and orange in the sky. I tried to push away the uneasy feeling that something was off with Theo. His eyes looked a bit bloodshot, and he seemed strangely drawn to the windows whenever the moon came out from behind clouds. While Miriam showered, I cornered Theo gently in the living room. "Everything okay, bud?" He shrugged. "Just feeling weird," he admitted in a subdued voice. Heads pounding, a prickle of alarm went through me. My father's journal mentioned migraines or headaches as part of the signs. I forced a calm tone. "Maybe it's the stress from the funeral, or the weather." Theo nodded half-heartedly. Then he rubbed his arms. "I'm kinda cold, too." He excused himself and vanished upstairs. I stood there, uncertain how to help, my mind flicking again to that cryptic mention in the journal. It skipped me, but it won't skip my son. Could my father have meant my son? The generational skip might point to Theo instead of me. The possibility made my stomach twist. That evening we had a family dinner at the old pub in the village. Several relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles joined us. The conversation drifted to Great-Aunt Caroline's eccentricities, then to older family lore. Someone mentioned how the farmland behind the old estate had once been rumored to harbor strange animals at night. Another relative, an older cousin, made an offhand remark. "You know, back in the day they talked about some wolf spirit in the family. Our ancestors were superstitious. Called it the black sheep who'd get the wolf's bite." My ears perked up. I feigned casual interest. "Wolf spirit. That sounds like local legend, right?" She shrugged. "Yes, something about a family that was cursed. They'd occasionally produce a child who—" She paused, glancing at the others as though reconsidering her words. "Anyway, it's nonsense. Just old wives' tales. Grandpa used to tell them to scare us." I forced a laugh, but my mind raced. Father's journal clearly connected to these stories. The older folks were aware on some level, but no one wanted to speak openly. Theo, meanwhile, had hardly touched his meal. He sat hunched, face pale. When I asked if he felt ill, he just shook his head. Miriam gave him worried looks. By the time we finished, the moon was rising high, a brilliant orb peeking through the pub's windows. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. We returned to our cottage around 10. The night sky was clear, and the full moon cast sharp shadows across the yard. Theo rushed upstairs without a word, locking himself in his room. Miriam and I shared a concerned glance. "Should we check on him?" she asked softly. I nodded, climbing the stairs. I tapped on Theo's door. "Son." No answer. Another knock, louder. "Theo, you all right?" From inside I heard shuffling, then a muffled groan. Alarmed, I tried the knob. It was locked. "Theo!" Finally he responded in a strained voice. "I'm okay. Need to be alone, please." His tone made my blood run cold. Anxiety coiled in my gut. Miriam joined me, her eyes wide with worry. We considered forcing the door open, but decided to give him a moment. Maybe he just needed privacy. Back in the living room, I paced. My father's journal weighed in my pocket. If the curse was real, if it latched onto Theo, was he experiencing that transformation now? The notion seemed mad. Yet my father had believed it enough to record warnings. An hour passed, the tension growing thick. Finally, Miriam went to bed, exhausted. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the armchair, reading the journal by lamplight. Father described the black sheep signs, restlessness under the moon's glow, headaches that worsen at dusk, a feverish chill that no blanket can soothe, a strange compulsion to hide away. Then, under a particularly clear full moon, the cursed one might slip out into the night and become something else. He wrote of fangs, claws, primal hunger. "Our family hunts the black sheep," he'd written, "to protect others from its madness." Hunt? The thought of harming my own son turned my stomach. Father must have been insane. Or else in some corner of his mind he believed he was protecting the family from a monstrous threat. A sudden noise shattered my reverie. The click of a door opening upstairs. My heart thumped. I leapt to my feet, creeping toward the staircase. Dim light spilled from the hallway. At the top step, I found Theo's bedroom door open, the room empty. A draught fluttered the curtains. The window was wide open, leading onto the small porch roof. My chest constricted. He'd climbed out. Why? I scrambled to the window and peered outside. The yard stretched beyond, bathed in moonlight. No sign of him. My pulse hammered. I raced downstairs and out the front door. The moonlit lawn glowed eerily. I called Theo's name in a frantic whisper, not wanting to alarm Miriam. My voice echoed across the silent fields. The only reply was the keening wind. I scanned the boundary of the property, noticing a gate leading to the woodland beyond. An unsettling memory. Father's notes about how the black sheep was drawn to wild places under the full moon. Torch in hand, I hurried through the gate. Tall grasses brushed my legs. The full moon illuminated a ragged footpath leading among oak trees. My heart pounded with dread. I wasn't sure what I'd do if I found Theo acting strangely. Deeper in the woods, the air felt still, almost suffocating. The flashlight caught glimpses of branches overhead. Leaves rustled in a hush. Then, faintly, I heard a rustle off to the left. I froze, breath held. Another movement like someone stepping on twigs. I crept that way, shining the light around. Through a gap in the foliage, I saw a figure slouched against a tree trunk. My stomach lurched. It was Theo. He clutched his head, trembling. His hair fell in messy strands over his face. "Son," I whispered, stepping closer. He didn't react. As I approached, I saw that his clothes were damp with sweat. He lifted his gaze to meet mine, and I nearly dropped the flashlight. His eyes looked different, pupils dilated in the bright moonlight, almost reflecting it back. "Dad?" his voice warbled. "It hurts so much." I knelt beside him. "Theo, we'll get help. Come back to the house." He shook his head, wincing as if pained by the suggestion. "No, can't. I feel—" He broke off with a sharp intake of breath. His arms tightened around his torso, nails digging into his sleeves. A primal fear roiled in me. My father's warnings hammered in my brain. Claws, fangs, primal hunger. I pressed a hand to Theo's shoulder. "Look at me. It's going to be all right." He stared at me with wide, anguished eyes. Then, in a voice laced with strange resonance, he said, "I need to. Run." Before I could stop him, he lurched upright and bolted deeper into the woods. His speed was startling more than any normal teenage sprint. "Theo!" I shouted, chasing after him. My heart pounded painfully. Twigs snapped underfoot as I stumbled through brambles, calling his name in desperation. Eventually, I lost him. The woods stretched on, silent and vast. I stood panting, frantic. My flashlight revealed only twisted trunks and shifting shadows. Overhead, the moon glowed ominously, as though fueling his flight. I had no choice but to go back for help. I returned to the cottage, half in shock. Miriam was waiting in the living room, eyes wild with worry when she saw my face. She demanded to know what was happening. With trembling lips, I told her the truth, or at least the partial truth about Father's journal, the family curse, and Theo's disappearance. She stared at me in disbelief. "A curse? That's absurd. Our son's maybe he's ill. Or worse," I muttered, racking my brain for a rational approach. If Father's notes were correct, the only immediate solution was to prevent him from harming anyone or himself until the moon waned. We decided to contact the local authorities, just in case Theo was wandering lost. But the lines were spotty, and the nearest police station was miles away. I left a garbled message on their answering service. Then I recalled the conversation about certain relatives who knew the old legends intimately. Possibly, they'd be at the funeral or staying in the village. We jumped into our car and drove back to the heart of the village, searching for any of the older family members. The local pub was still open, a handful of patrons inside. By chance, we found my Uncle Roderick there, nursing a half-pint. Roderick was the oldest living male in the extended clan, a man rumoured to keep all the family secrets. He looked up as we barged in, dishevelled and frantic. "What's this about?" he demanded in a low rumble. I laid it out. The old journals, the strange curse, Theo's odd symptoms, his disappearance under the full moon. Roderick's expression tightened with alarm. The colour drained from his face. "So it's happened again," he murmured. "We prayed this day wouldn't come." "What do you mean?" Miriam demanded. "Where is our son? Is he in danger?" Roderick's eyes flicked between us. Slowly he gestured for us to sit. "Listen carefully. Our family. It's not just rumours. The black sheep is real. Every generation or two a child is marked. They transform under the harvest moon, becoming something akin to a wolf, though not precisely. They can be violent if cornered. We must find him before dawn, or the curse will root deeper." Miriam looked ready to faint. I felt no better. "You're saying my boy, he's become a werewolf?" I asked, voice shaking. Roderick sighed. "It's not exactly that. It's older, more primal, but call it what you will. We must gather the family's old knowledge. There's a ritual, a way to hold him safely until the moon's power passes." At that moment I recalled the line in Father's journal about hunting the black sheep. My stomach twisted. You're not going to harm him, are you?" Roderick's gaze was grave. "We'll do whatever it takes to keep him and others safe." Without delay, Roderick assembled a small group of relatives. 2 older cousins and an aunt, who supposedly knew wards or prayers from the old days. They armed themselves with hunting rifles and silver-tipped bullets. That final detail froze my blood. We set off into the woods in 2 vehicles, parking near a trailhead. The moon was high, lighting our path more than any flashlight could. Miriam clung to my arm, tears glimmering in her eyes. We both prayed Theo would be found unhurt, or at least in some form we could reason with. Roderick led the search, stepping quietly through the underbrush. The old aunt muttered hushed incantations, something Gaelic perhaps. My heart pounded at every rustle. The forest seemed alive with tension, branches leaning like skeletal hands. Then, from up ahead, came a low snarl. My gut twisted. We froze, exchanging looks. Another growl, this time more distinct animalistic, but resonating with a human-like timbre. The hair on my neck stood on end. Roderick signaled for silence. We crept forward until the trees thinned, revealing a small clearing. There, silhouetted by moonlight, crouched a figure. My breath caught. It was vaguely human, yet elongated, with limbs too long and a spine bent at an unnatural angle. Patches of coarse hair covered its arms and back, and its hands ended in curled claws. But the face, oh God! I recognized enough of Theo's features to know this creature was my son. Miriam stifled a horrified gasp. My knees almost gave out. For a moment the beast my boy sniffed the air, seemingly oblivious to our presence. Then it whipped around, glowing eyes locking onto us. A guttural snarl erupted from its throat. Roderick raised his rifle and I lunged, hissing, "No!" If he fired, he might kill Theo. I'd rather die than let that happen. But the creature bared its teeth in warning, saliva dripping from elongated canines. Miriam sobbed, stepping behind me. Roderick's older cousin raised a second rifle. This standoff felt seconds from disaster. "Wait," I pleaded, voice shaking. "Let me try. He might still know me." Slowly, hands raised to show no threat, I inched toward the beast. His eyes flicked to me, wild, frightened, feral. But somewhere in that face, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition. "Theo," I whispered. "Son, it's me, Dad." He snarled softly, body tensed as if ready to spring away or attack. My heart hammered, tears threatening. "You're safe," I murmured, hoping some part of him heard. "We'll help you." Behind me, Roderick and the others formed a ring, guns at the ready. The old aunt murmured a chant I couldn't understand. The tension built to a breaking point. Then Theo let out a shuddering, half-human cry. He staggered backward, one clawed hand clutching his head. My father's journal had mentioned such moments of confusion during the transformation. If I could coax him nearer, we might subdue him without violence. I took another step, ignoring how my stomach clenched in fear. Theo, come with me. He locked eyes with me, trembling. For a heartbeat, I saw raw panic in that gaze like a cornered animal. Then, with a strangled whimper, he lunged. Not at me, but away, bolting for the tree line. "Stop him!" Roderick barked, and 2 rifles cracked. I shouted in alarm, but the shots missed or only grazed him. Theo vanished into the darkness. Panic surged. We chased after him, the group fanning out among the trees. Broken branches snapped underfoot, and distant snarls echoed. The night turned chaotic. A swirl of moonlit shapes, calls from Roderick, curses from the others. Suddenly, the aunt called out from a short distance away, "Over here, I see him!" We converged on a small ravine, where the aunt had set up a crude snare, scattering a circle of salt and herbs. The old prayers apparently had some power. Theo was cornered at the far side, pacing like a caged wolf. His eyes darted among us. Fury and fear mingled. My paternal instincts screamed to protect him, but how could I approach without risking a savage attack? Roderick raised his rifle again, aiming carefully. "No!" I shouted, stepping into his line of fire. "He's my son! You said there's a ritual something that can hold him without killing." Roderick's expression was torn. "Yes, we can try to bind him." The aunt began chanting more loudly, sprinkling a mixture of herbs at the edges of the ravine. Theo bared his teeth, whining in agitation. The tension soared as we inched forward, forming a tighter circle, herding him into the center. I locked eyes with my son's tormented visage. "Theo," I whispered, please let us help." He let out a desperate snarl, then lunged at me. I flinched back, but his swipe only tore my sleeve. My heart thundered. Roderick leveled his gun, presumably ready with silver bullets. If Theo attacked again, Roderick might pull the trigger. That was when Miriam darted forward, tears streaming. She held out her hands. "Theo, I love you, baby. Please stop." Her voice wavered with raw emotion. In that moment, the creature paused. Theo's monstrous form hesitated, shoulders quivering. The mother's voice must have triggered a memory, for his contorted face seemed to soften. Roderick seized the opportunity. With a nod to his cousin, they tossed a net forward, an old, sturdy net reinforced with steel wiring. It fell over Theo, tangling in his limbs. The aunt chanted frantically, dusting more salt and herbs over him. Theo thrashed, letting out a furious howl that rattled the night. Miriam and I rushed forward, despite the danger, pressing down on the edges of the net. Theo writhed beneath, claws snagging the mesh, but the woven steel cables held. Slowly, his convulsions grew weaker, as though the mystical barrier sapped his energy. Finally, he slumped, panting heavily, eyes squeezed shut. The group encircled him, stepping carefully around the net. The aunt completed her incantation, and a hush fell, broken only by Theo's ragged breaths. Under Roderick's direction, we carried Theo still pinned by the net back through the woods to a secure shed on a relative's old property. It was a stone outbuilding, windowless, with a stout door. We placed him inside, net and all, lighting only a single lantern. Roderick's cousin locked the heavy door. My heart bled at the sight of him imprisoned like a rabid animal. But at least he was alive. The aunt told us we had to keep him under watch until dawn, when the moon's hold would lessen. If the old stories were true, by morning he might revert to normal. Miriam and I stayed with him in that cold shed, refusing to leave. Roderick and the others stood guard outside, rifles at the ready in case Theo broke free. The smell of musty hay and the tang of iron from the net filled my nostrils. Theo moaned and contorted at times, the beastly visage still present. His eyes glowed in the lamplight, full of confusion. I spoke to him softly, reminding him we loved him, urging him to fight whatever darkness gripped him. Miriam stroked his hair through the gaps in the net, tears rolling down her cheeks. Gradually, as hours passed, his breathing slowed. The coarse hair receded, the fangs shortened. By the time the sky outside paled with dawn, he lay there exhausted, nearly human again. Our son, pale and trembling, the net leaving indentations on his skin. When sunlight finally broke over the horizon, we dared to remove the net. Theo stirred, blinking blearily. His voice was raspy. "Mom? Dad?" We embraced him, relief flooding in waves. He was disoriented, remembering little beyond a haze of pain and fear. I choked back sobs, murmuring reassurances that it was over, that he was safe. But was it truly over? The aunt and Roderick looked grim, reminding us that the curse might not be gone. It could return whenever the moon was full. Unless we found a more permanent solution. The old text suggested it could be suppressed through certain rites, but never fully broken. A black sheep would always bear the mark, generation to generation. Miriam and I took Theo home that day. We kept him close, watched for any lingering symptoms. He seemed mostly back to normal, though subdued, as if haunted by nightmares he couldn't fully articulate. The family offered to help, to teach us the old ways of managing the curse. We reluctantly accepted, determined to protect our son from future transformations. Months have passed. We rarely speak of that night in the woods. Theo continues his teenage routines, though there's a guarded look in his eyes now, as if a part of him fears the beast inside could resurface. Miriam and I learned from the old aunt how to brew protective teas, how to arrange certain wards in his bedroom. It feels surreal, like stepping into a realm of dark folklore. But we do it without question. My father's journal remains locked in a drawer. Sometimes I reread his final note. It skipped me, but it won't skip my son. He'd known. Somehow he suspected that my child, his grandson, would be the black sheep. He left behind clues, though he never fully explained the details or prepared me for that horrifying confrontation. Yet in the end, I understand he wanted to equip me to save Theo, even posthumously. We do not know if Theo's transformations can be halted permanently, or if each full moon will test his will. But we do know this. The family's curse is alive, carried in our blood, and each generation must face its horrors. And on nights when the moon rises bright, I find myself standing watch outside Theo's room, ears straining for any sign of a low growl or a muffled snarl. The wind whips around the eaves, and an ancient dread stirs within me. But so far our wards hold. Theo remains himself. Still, I can't help but glance at my reflection sometimes. Father said the curse skipped him yet. Is it truly gone from me? Or does it slumber, waiting for a moment of weakness? The moon is a silent witness to secrets older than memory. One thing is certain. The black sheep runs in the family, and we have no choice but to live with it. We keep our watch, and we pray the day never comes when we must raise a net or a gun against someone we love again. Because in this lineage, the curse is never quite buried. It only waits for the next generation to claim.